Welcome to the podcast of Data and Analytics in Business. We will learn from the leading industry experts using data and analytics to solve the problems and create values in practice. We will also learn where the industry is heading to and how data and analytics will shape the industry in the future. Most importantly, how they are preparing their business for digital transformation and disruption in the future. I'm your host, Jason Tan, and thank you for listening. Welcome to the analytics. This episode, we have got Sakhee Dheer. She is the head of global business marketing at Facebook. Sakhee is based in Singapore, and she is all about data and marketing. We also have a very different format for this particular episode. I have got my friend Anne Lim, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Travel Media, joining me as a co running this particular interview. Anne brings her domain expertise in marketing and advertising, and she has been so helpful to help me co-hosting this particular episode. As a digital marketer with engineering and technology background, Sakhee goes into great details in sharing with us what does it mean to become in this modern and digital age. From creative planning, creative production, data collection, data attribution, as well as the distribution, marketer or any organization has to embrace the both sides of creative and data analytical technology in order to drive a success. She then goes on into a great details, sharing with us how organization can combine the internal and external data to drive campaign. Equally, she shared with us what does it mean to be a data-driven marketer, and how do you use data at different stages to drive to have a great return of investment. We then talk about how to take this one step further and bring the personalization and customer experience advertising and digital marketing. Sakhee gave some great example how that this can be achieved and how personalization could potentially be involving in the world of digital marketing. If you are a chief marketing officer and senior executive in the organization who want to understand the power of combining your data to get the marketing message out for your organization in this crowded world where personalization and customer experience is becoming increasingly more important. This is the episode you wouldn't want to miss out. If you have any question for myself, Sakhee, and Anne, please feel free to send us a message. Connect to Sakhee. Her LinkedIn profile is going to be on the website where you can click and connect or follow her works. I would love to hear your feedback and what format that I am experimenting with a group conversation and interview. I would greatly appreciate if you click the button of subscribing to this podcast platform. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Good morning, Sakhee and Sue. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Analytics Show podcast. I have Sue joining me as a co-host in this interview. So she is in advertising and marketing, and I know this is going to be epic. And equally, I'm super duper excited to have you here, Sakhee, to find out more about the use of data analytics in the digital marketing and the advertising, especially from some of the perspective from you working at the head at Facebook as the head of digital marketing. Welcome.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me, Sakhee. It was nice having you. I'm really excited to meet you. Really excited to see what the podcast is all about today.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks to on the podcast. Really excited to be here to share some of my experiences as a digital marketing person working in this field for a few years now, and being able to sort of work across the whole ecosystem of digital marketing. So hope useful nuggets for your audience today.
Absolutely. I think that is the one that I'm getting super excited about. Now, I'm going to get started first, Anne, if that's okay. For my research, I found out that, Sakhee, you have written quite a bit on the introspection, going with the true identity of the self. Now, let's start with this more personal aspect of your life. And how does this esoteric side of your life interact with your professional life?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a heavy question to start with. I've always been a little spiritual in my thinking, or just sort of always wanting to understand what's my purpose, what's the deeper meaning to what we do, right? Why do we do what we do? Why do we work so hard? And how do we sort of bring it to, driving meaning and purpose, being able to do what we do, because we do spend a large amount of our time at work. And how do you make it more meaningful for yourself, right? And I think I did write about it quite a lot last year, but it was just, I think, the backdrop of COVID, where I think we all went through personal adjustments and changes. I was also on my maternity leave with my second son, who was like a few months old early last year. So I think it was a combination of my leave, where I had a little more time to just be at kids in the family and not be thinking of work, where I did get more time to introspect, and just whoever has had little babies know the initial few months are just about being with the baby, and you do get some time to read and think. So I think it was go a little deeper, read more about the topic, and I thought it was good to share with some of the connections I have on my social networks. And I think it's broader as well, right? Like it's just that to it. But I do feel that in the current future, all leaders, managers, or organizations should, I think, be a little bit more in touch with themselves, build a culture of authenticity in their teams or in their organization, so that people feel comfortable bringing their real selves and continue to strive to be better at all aspects of life. And I think just working from home, working with your families and kids in the background have taught you to be a little more empathetic towards your coworkers and be able to see all sides of life, that have this corporate persona, right, where you're almost driving towards a sort of a robotic personality. No matter what happens in your life, you are having this smiling face and you're going on. So I think it's basically my reading about that and my quest to become more authentic, learn more about like just all aspects of who we are, and then be better individuals at work, right? Full of empathy. And I feel it drives better work as well, because ultimately people, and you have to know the different context of people, whether it's like collaboration in your teams or it's your customers, like in marketing or in business here, right? You're always thinking of new products or narratives or creative. So if you don't get to understand the persona in complete sense, I think we miss out as well. And I think we also, like the broader sense, right? I don't know if you're contributing in any which way, but the more we're hearing of climate change and the changes to just the society, it's important to just be aware of all aspects of things around you, right? So yeah, basically that which continues to nudge me to learn more about the self, the brain, the body, and just how our existence, how we coexist in society.
I love it.
Oh, that's very inspiring, right? Like, I mean, I really like what you said about like bringing a new level of mindfulness and empathy to work. I think that's kind of missing in the world right now, especially in the backdrop of the pandemic, right?
And I think as with two kids now, especially if I have a young one, the second one just come out a few months, I can totally relate to that. I think it also gives me a new perspective of looking at the world. So I really love of what you had to say earlier.
Yeah. So I was just mind me asking, you're from an engineering background, right? So how did you make that switch to marketing? Like, how did you find that interest in business and marketing?
Yeah, and I don't know how many Indians you know, but but I think all of us are in some way or form. And I think it's changing now in society. I think with and lawyers, right? Doctors, lawyers, and engineers. It's just, I think our parents have always felt that's a good profession to get into. You get into a stable job. I booming a few years back in India, right? And it continues to sort of boom. But a lot more avenues have come out. Definitely, I see a sea change in current students graduating, definitely much more open to what they can do, especially the startup scene, the startup culture taken off quite exponentially in India as well. We've seen quite a number of startups coming out and doing well within the country and beginning to expand. So that's interesting. So yeah, that's sort of the background, right? Like you're always sort of conditioned to say, okay, what do you want to be, engineer or doctor? Right? And lawyer was never in my roadmap because, I mean, there's just too many thick books to read. Doctor still, I think after you've done the initial studies, you can still, I think, continue, you can practice, but lawyer, you have to continue studying. So I took the easy to engineering. But then I think on a more serious note, I was always interested in psychology and I wanted to always know more about people, their lives, circumstances, and just wanting to be able to do that more often, right? And I think just allows you to do that on just that I think you need to work with a lot more people, even from a functional perspective, right? You've got to work with product managers, audience managers, creative people, insights person, data, analytics, even, right? You get to, especially digital marketers, you get to like exercise both sides of your brain because you're also technical, you're also creative, and there's a big people elements to it. So I really enjoyed the marketing at that time, and slowly I think digital my passion, and it's also what sort of taken off, and sort of marketing now is equal to digital marketing. I don't see it's blurring. I don't think there is just marketing, it's all digital marketing, right? So yeah, I think that pushed me in that to be able to work with people, understand people, and do that at scale. And that's why I've been in Asia Pacific roles for quite some time now. And I still continue to like that because it gives me the ability to stretch across markets, be able to understand more people's psychology, how people behave, customers interact across different markets, cultures, and even apps and tools, and so much of the cultural backdrop as well. So yeah, to make the shift. It wasn't, I mean, if you ask me the story, it wasn't that easy. It's taken a while because obviously you start with an engineering background. I did do an MBA in strategy and marketing, but then I wasn't immediately hired into it. I was hired with my technical background and analytics skill set. I was hired more into an operation. I was leading a particular analytics team to begin with. And then I slowly sort of started building more exposure and skill sets, and then mainstream marketing, which is still, I think digital still sort of leverages on my technical skill set because I still constantly have to understand how systems work, tools work, data, and then apply it to more of the broader marketing.
I think as an outsider, I feel like the marketing role these days is actually quite technical and quite hands-on compared to 10 or 20 years ago, but I could be wrong. I'm going to find out from you guys later on. Too much deeper in that topic. Sakhee, share with our listener about your role as a head of digital marketing, global business marketing at the Asia Pacific at Facebook. What are your key roles at Facebook?
Yeah, so I lead digital marketing for Facebook Business. So I'm in the business of educating agency and a broader ecosystem of consumers and users for the Facebook advertising, which could be creators, developers, small businesses, and partners who basically leverage Facebook's family of apps for their business needs and reach out to more and more individuals, right? So yeah, in a nutshell, my job is to excite, inform them, and educate them about what's new in the Facebook's family of apps. Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, tools, ad formats, what are the capabilities, measurement capabilities, targeting capabilities are present. Plus, I think as an organization, as Facebook business, how do we also take a more leadership position in the community? So so my job is basically to understand the goals of the organization internally, and then be able to sort of run digital campaigns and to be able to shift perception, move brand awareness, consideration, so that, and across the funnel, right? People who are spending huge budgets, how do you continue to give them more and let them find more value? For small businesses or for mom and pop stores who probably just have a Facebook page or an Instagram, educate them more about the other features so that they can expand their business more. So yeah, in a nutshell, basically educating as many people to do that. And I like to say I market marketing to marketers. So also having to be on the top of your game because you're ultimately speaking to marketers, and we need to educate people who know about marketing and they're already at a certain level of how to leverage certain channels, and then how do you prove the value of them in that context.
Now that's really interesting. Marketing to marketers, and it sounds daunting already. Like, whereas, like, what would you say? Like, it's your biggest challenge in that? Like, does it get easier as Facebook grows, or does it get harder for you?
No, true, and that's a good question. Not a lot of people ask that as well, right? But the reality is, as you're working for a company which is growing fast space, the challenges change every quarter. And for sure, if I were to, I've been in the organization for more than 4 years now. And definitely when I joined, there were different set of challenges, which is I was almost to be hired to build the digital marketing function. And we did have a marketing organization, but the structure was lacking. And I think we're still in the journey as the company grows at a very fast space. It is the structure, driving the right tools, the right processes, and be able to take everybody on that journey together, right? Because every product, every team have their own objective goals, and the company is growing at a fast pace. So I think if I were when the company was a little more smaller, the challenges were more about having to do everything on your own, and there was no process, there were no tools. So much so that even some of the documentation work and other things for a lot, all just folded into one person's job, right? Like I played the role of a sourcing expert. I played the role of media lead. I played the role of a capability, like we were building capabilities of web, social, email, like links of capabilities of marketing. At the same time, being the measurement and the analytics person, also figuring out where to get data from, how do you combine it, and then ultimately also being sort of a strategy lead and bringing it all together and sharing with people. It was very easy. There were smaller teams, so you would directly, like I used to sit next to like the creative lead and our audience and product leads, and the work used to be, we used to do a lot more, but it used to be faster, right? Now, I think as the organization grows, just balancing that aspect of growth, more people on the team. There's also more scope. So we do have slightly larger teams across, like we have more products, we have more audiences we are looking at. So I think it's that, right? How do you when you're doing a particular campaign, how do you make sure everybody on the team is aligned to the same business goal and we're meeting the objectives? And I think there's one more thing probably, which is probably unique to only, right? Like we as a team and individuals are a combination. We are both analytical, we are technical, as well we are creative. And a lot of the other individuals in a marketing organization are more focused on the creative and the content aspects, right? And you're thinking of personas, you're thinking of strategy. But when it comes down to us, it's more a combination of multiple skill sets, because we're also setting up campaigns, thinking of data, we're thinking of what's the right tool at many points. And I'm like, definitely Facebook. We do now have standard tools we work with. But for smaller organizations where you're still figuring out, like for email, what tool to use for social, for dissemination of social content. Can I use a certain tool? Is there a content and also thinking of strategies like, should I have like a programmatic team internally or externally? Should I have a data management platform internally? And I think we, as digital marketers, we work across that funnel. So there's also sometimes a challenge to explain to the organization, because a large number of people in the organization are more the creative individuals, and we work sort of across as the technical and the data bits as well. So that's an increasing challenge in larger organization of how do you sort of explain the complexity of your work. The last one would be you sort of are also at the end of the funnel. Like a lot of times you are on point to take your campaign to market, right? So we have to constantly, and I think it's a challenge and it's an advice also to all of the digital marketing teams as well, try to push your space or have a seat on the table from the get-go, from the planning to the budget discussions, to the resourcing, to what creative, how much budget is there to even kinds of creatives, right? Because you may choose the best strategy. You may have the most amazing measurement plan. But if your creative or your leaders cannot invest the right budget in the right buckets, you've right? And also be able to explain SLAs that we will take a certain amount of time to do the tagging or to set up or to drive reporting. So that's, I think, another piece of how do you timelines, SLAs, even though we're at the end of the funnel, right? Because the creative process can take a long time. Sometimes creators forget that if we have to launch next week, we do need to give the media team, agencies, a certain number of time to make sure the measurement plan is set up, the media is set up, the bookings are done, the bidding is happening, and so on and so forth, right? That's probably a more general challenge, not particularly like a company thing. Hope that gives you a little more context.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I always believe that can only get better by combining their in-house data or internal data with the external data. I think on this context, my question for you is how organization can house data better and to combine with the external data to drive more impactful digital marketing?
That's, again, a very good question, right? Because especially in the current context where we're talking of increased focus on privacy, data handling, there are also like walled gardens being created, right? Like the bigger organizations are wanting to have their own ecosystem and own data processes and sort of convert them into more publicly available third-party data to in-house data. The prevalence of ad blockers, or I think with the availability of looking at the OTT clicks and some of the OTT TVs where you've had to it's more of a subscription model versus an advertising model, right? So things seem to be changing. I don't know what's the future, but things that we'll come to see in the next 2 to 3 years evolves together. But as of now, it looks to be a situation where things are changing. And that's why I think it makes it more important to have ownership and understanding of your first party data, right? So how do you continue to manage your first party data, leverage it? I think the importance of that is increasing manifold. In the past, you could maybe not have a lot of structure, internal tools, CRM and systems, yet there were a lot of external providers where you could just buy email marketing, buy some targeting and sort of be done with it, right? But with the digital ecosystem, with the more personalized targeting, and in the backdrop of this changing landscape and consumer preferences, is definitely more important. And in the context of, I think, marketing, right? When you're working with external agencies or partners or depending on other third-party data, it also becomes harder to have long-lasting knowledge on brand and drive agility. World right now, it's all about how can you be in the moment and respond to certain trends in the marketplace or on the social platform. So that's very important to use. So I'm a big believer of using in-house data properly and to do it, right? Because ultimately you want to send personalized messages to the right people at the right time in the more appropriate fashion. And you as an organization, or you are the best judge of doing that. So maintaining the right CRM systems, email data, having the right social information. And I think the challenge right now is how do you connect these different systems together? And there are a lot of marketing systems available out there. And in different organizations that I speak to my friends from the industry as well, it's a big challenge across all industries of how to more effectively use your in-house data. I think it exists, but it exists in silos, which is like you can do the most awesome email marketing, you can do the most awesome campaign, you can do the most awesome like sales outreach, but connecting it all together, I think not all organizations have figured out. But great examples which stand out are, I think, the e-com apps, they've done an incredible job of just becoming like those kind of super apps and connecting all the data together in one place and having that design methodology from the beginning. So yeah, but to your question, I think this was a slightly more a longer answer to your question, but one I recommend in this current situation is, build your custom audiences based on the sales CRM you may have. Can you build a custom audience to target across media? Can you then work with your sales teams to have email addresses and then use that across platforms? So you use your sales CRM as the base and then create custom audiences across, media or email and other platforms which you may be using. Website is an important like website visitor information, how people are engaging, and build like different segments of people in the absence of, being able to identify them right away. So custom website audiences. Can you then extend that through like lookalikes or branded audiences, which similar to your visitors and your users and show similar behaviors? And you can do that across most of the platforms today. So those will be like some examples to do that.
Oh, well, I think due to the power of data, one of the key progresses in many industries is the personalization of that customer experience, right? So do you think digital advertising has reached their full potential?
Yeah. No, I don't think we've reached our full potential, right? Because we still get disconnected messages or emails that are not meant for us. Potential. But for sure, we've made great progress right now. But like I said, I think in the backdrop of how things are evolving with like creation of walled gardens within like systems, discussion on data privacy and data handling, I think, it like I had mentioned before, I think it's the next 2 to 3 years will probably showcase how much more personalization and full or integrated experiences the customers can get. But particularly, I think within platforms, we're getting there, right? Like when you reach out, when you're targeted with a certain ad on Facebook or some other social media platforms, good in anticipating customer behaviors, what people are searching for. So it's reaching a place of good personalization. And also, I think if you look at the OTT apps, right? The Amazon, the Prime, Netflix, Grab, calling out a lot of these apps. I think they're doing a good job. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do more, right? Because a few apps I feel are trying to be everything, and it also like messes up with the customer experiences. So sometimes it's not that personalized. But yeah, a lot of opportunity there. How data gets handled, how data is stored, how I think as a ecosystem we make decisions on data handling, data privacy. So a lot will will be more visible as in a few years' time, how it all.
I can't help but sometimes to wonder if the personalization and the privacy could coexist or not. Because at one hand is like one is throwing the other one off. Do you think that is?
I think it is, because the tools, right? A lot of the stuff, it's a hard one as well, right? Like on how the tools and the thinking will evolve. But a few years back, who thought we will be be using, social media to the extent we do? and we would have disrupted advertising how we knew it. We all TV, print, and radio format before that. But it's completely changed. It's changed the description of what marketing is, right? And whether it's the mobile phones, I don't think anybody anticipated. So, I have a lot of faith in how I think humans or individuals or technocrats, right, will evolve and innovate. But definitely looking at the trends, looks like data privacy and policies around handling of data here to stay. And all organizations have to sort of embrace, evolve accordingly. And I think it's also a lot about communication. There's also a lot of misunderstanding about how companies use data and how that data is used to target you or give you the experiences you want. Individually, for me, I love personalization and I like being targeted with the right information, right? Because there is so much out there based on, I think, what I'm searching for, what maybe the things I'm looking at. I love to be information which possibly falls within the same, because it's making my experience better. It's giving me more options based on my context and my behavior. And I think that's great. And there's an element of education which companies need to also drive, currently use data. And at the same time, with the policies and the evolution of the landscape, continue to sort of update how data handling happens on the platform. And they continue to maintain that experience. And I think it's possible, right? With advancement, if we can go to the moon, I'm sure this is not that big a deal. I think we can figure it out.
I love it. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, so this is really an interesting topic because I'm quite a big advocate for ethical AI and ethical data usage. And I can see a lot of these tech brands are moving towards that direction, right? So, and what Jason said about that fine balance, personalization and privacy, I personally don't think that we have found that perfect balance yet. There's a lot of potential to that. I'm just really curious to understand, because digital marketing is what we know digital marketing as last year is probably different from this year. We will be different next year, right? So what do you think is true data-driven marketing? How do you see, because at one point, as if I am going to see a lot of information or a lot of advertising of what I want, there is a risk of polarization, right? I'm then trapped in this bubble of mine. So how do you view we can, as marketing professionals, to avoid that kind of situation?
Yeah. Very deep, right? You have how do we do data-driven marketing? And also how do we drive ethics and ensuring people read the right information, right? People who are a little polarized are not right and never see the other side. And I think that's a very important point. So let's talk about that, right? So again, I don't think it's general comment, right? Because I don't think any of us are in a position to sort of solve for that right now, but more of a policy and our governments and ruling bodies need to, like anything, right? Now digital is such an important part of how we do things, whether we are consuming information or buying information, even connecting, right? This pandemic has shown how much we are continuing to sort of leverage these technologies to do our work, to talk to our loved ones and maintain sanity. And how do you sort of make sure these interactions are balanced? And only come up with structured policies and thinking from the government, right? Or your local bodies or your governing bodies, because you can't leave this decision making to organizations. Because in my mind, what we study, right? The academics of an organization is you're there to maximize shareholder value, right? Which is you're there to drive a certain objective. You have board members, you have to survive. And ultimately, I think every organization gets into where they need to ensure that people are doing well, the company is healthy, right? So the pressures are different, what I mean, for every organization. So you can't leave that decision to one organization. It needs to be a collective, whether it's multiple together. And I think it's happening to some level where you have like oversight boards or committees being created to look at data, what data is, has the potential to flare up. There are rules and regulations being put in place, for messages that can on social platforms to like mass people. How do you regulate that and stop spread of misinformation? How do you also give more control to local people to be able to flag out content which is divisive in the right, to be able to keep flagging out, right? So this is how platforms are doing, right? To be able to democratize that decision making and then allow machine learning and AI to learn those algorithms and then be so that there is lesser and lesser human involvement. But on a larger basis, I think the ethics need to be driven by a larger, committee, because we can't leave that decision to a single individual or an organization. So that's like, but for sure, that's a big challenge because we're looking at, riots being driven by misinformation, elections being influenced by the ease of sharing on social media. But again, I think there's a flip side. Any platform, the pros and the cons, like a coin has two sides, right? I think as a committee, as a society, we just need to figure out how do you lower down the bad impacts of a possibly good technology. Like with social media, I couldn't imagine the pandemic without the tools we have, the digital tools we have, right? Be able to entertain kids at home. Schooling has gone the way it should. Work has gone the way it should, even with the existence. Plus, I see so many people helping each other. The vaccine information, there is, health center information. Even like last year, there was a situation, there was a scenario I read that there were like old parents in one part of India, and they had nobody to take care of them. And everybody was down. And their son was in Singapore, and he was able to sort of through like certain groups, and where they were living, they didn't know too many people for some reason. Through some groups, he was able to get help. And for a month, a few younger to deliver medicines to them, grocery to them, and just help them out. And there's so many such stories with the power of, I think, what the tools we have and the targeting we can do to spread good as well, right? So there's a ton of good and a little bit of bad. Like there are blood donations, there's funding, fundraisers happening. And there's so much about societies, like there's so much about a smaller part of, say, China or Japan, which I think we didn't know of, or the challenges in more developed know of, but now we're so much more aware of those things and able to think of either ways to contribute or donate or just be aware and full of empathy, right? So yeah, I think that's a big problem. Yeah, we need to just look at the good as well, and then that there are like more organizations and policies which are set to ensure not too much harm continues to happen, right? But yeah, I think your other question was around data-driven marketing. And if you were to look at it purely from a context of work, effective data-driven marketing, I think you just asked about that. And I think in my mind, it's about campaigns or the work which connect best to your business objective, or like what are the goals you want to drive. Like, for example, you could be talking and your objective would be increase perception of a particular product so that people buy it more, right? So that could be sort of the, increase revenue, increase perception of the product. And then sort of derive your marketing objective, your creative objective, your media objective. So that's, I think, the first place where I feel data plays a big role, so that you can understand, what revenue, what parts of the business, what are the growth, what's the ecosystem. Say, for example, if you're doing that work in Japan, is Japan, like Japanese advertising industry is still a little more traditional, but they do spend a lot of digital marketing dollars. So how do you sort of take some percent and invest in digital product, which you may be wanting to increase, right? So starting with that premise, I think is the first step to data-driven marketing. And you've got to work with a lot of business analysts and business teams to understand the whole mindset, right? Creative. How do you think of designing the right creative message, narrative, right? Like one of the good examples I read about is Goodyear tires. And Goodyear tires is basically, I had read about it, which said, they wanted to talk about keeps you safe because you can brake properly. And one of the first campaigns they wanted to do was great technology allows you to brake. They said, our, car buyers are fairly technical. So they just talked about the value of the tire. But ultimately, what they went out with it was Goodyear tires saving lives, right? Because it was like every time you brake, it could, if the tire is not good, you could topple or the car could really bang or whatever, right? So that emotive, because of course you have a rational messaging, but how do you make it emotional? Again, that is very data driven. How do you understand what works for your audience? What kind of messages to deliver to them in what format? So that's very important. Then I think media channels, Instagram versus Twitter versus any programmatic technology versus partnering with a content body like maybe an HBR or a Forbes. When do you do that? So again, that is very data driven based on what's worked, how much budget on. And then ultimately, once you've decided to build that plan with a creative, an audience, a budget, how do you keep optimizing? If Facebook is not working, can you invest some money in, say, Instagram stories if that's working? So how do you continue to optimize it? And then understand the KPIs. What was the CTR? What are the video views? How much revenue did you actually drive back for? How many people actually bought your product? And then closing the loop with business, building the right benchmarks, having the right dashboards, and to understand each part of this process, right? How, and then again, a market level view. Which markets based on, if you're only in Singapore, but if you're in Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, how do you understand how the particular campaign or effort worked different? What audiences reacted? So that's, I think, an ideal data-driven marketing in my mind, right? Where at every touch point, you're using data to hone your plans. And I think at the beginning, at the end, be able to your leadership, your organization, on the impact and why you're doing what you're doing.
I remember growing up as a kid, advertising or marketing is about video production, the 30 second or a minute in the TV ad, the fancy ad, or maybe the beautiful billboard, beautiful picture on the magazine, right? But to some, I think at the same time, the landscape has changed so much. And I'm so glad that you talked quite a bit about the creative, and you touched a lot about that aspect of digital marketing, because I feel like it is a blending of two. To some extent, I personally, as an outsider, I feel like the creative side seems to be subdued. Nevertheless, how do you think the most impactful campaign and the best media plan to reach the business outcome? What are some fundamental that we always have to keep in mind in this digital age?
Yeah, well, that's a very important one, right? Because ultimately, all your marketing is about your creative. Your channels or your data are enablers, right? But ultimately, what is seeing is your creative, your message, your format. That's what is exciting them. So, and I think there's one tagline I really like, which is, you need to be thumb stopping, because right now your thumb is in. So the minute your thumb stops, that's when I think that's success for your campaigns. And that's a combination, right? The fundamentals of marketing stay the same. It is right message, right people, right time. And has, I think, slightly changed, right? Because what's the right time? Right time is basically figured out by the data, the premise of data-driven marketing, right? When are your audiences active? Where are they active? What is their content? What behaviors they're showing? Like through a lot of our data management platforms or through the targeting methodologies, behaviors, interest targeting, you can actually build a good persona of your audience and be able to, and over time, their behaviors, which channels are they active in? Are you more active in mobile apps or you're using desktop? And then accordingly target, right? So I think that's important. Using data and technology to right time. When's the right time? Like for a few social media platforms, they actually tell you that, Wednesday 9 to 10 and Thursday 7 to 11 p.m. as an example are the most receptive periods for you. Right? So that's the time to probably come up with your new campaign so that more eyeballs, more people see it, and then people can be targeted based on, I think, their behaviors. So I think that's important. Right message is important, which is saying what you want to say as an organization. Like the example I gave, are you able to tell people that the business objective was to increase revenue, but are you able to tell people why they should buy this product so that it ultimately increases? So that becomes like what's that value proposition of your product, right? Ultimately, so the basic, what's the product and what do the customers want to hear? So ultimately, it's always that Venn diagram, right? The intersection of what you want to say versus what the customer wants to hear. And if you center overlap of the Venn diagram, you have a winner out there, which is like, for example, if there's a pregnant lady and she wants to buy a pram for her upcoming baby, you basically tell why, this pram is for and so on. You have a 10% discount. And then it hits the same lady who's been searching for a pram. And there you have a winner, right? So certain such examples where you're getting to people in the context, and the right time is all dependent on data and media channels and methodologies. Right message will only come when you're working with like multiple people within people. The business reason, what's the business objective? What is the creative value proposition? How do you present it? Like in today's world, it's very important to present that. Is it like a video, a static, a GIF, a cinematograph, a carousel ad? Or should you do a different kind of a layout? Or should you have an in-skin format on a website? So there's so many things out there. Or in-app should be a banner. So there's so many ways to deliver your message. And also how, in what combination? Should you just do like static? Should you do a combination of video and static? Again, very data-driven, right? Like what has resonating with this audience? And I think it's also important to work collaboratively across the whole organization or whatever people are involved, right? The product person, the creative person, the insights person, to build that message. So that's important. And then right people is a third, right? Right time. Right people, understand your audience, understand your segmentation, understand how much personalization you can give them based on the current tools and the targeting capabilities you have internally and externally with your agencies possibly. And how much you can tailor messages for them. So that's important. Understand who's the right people or persona for your marketing.
That's very, very insightful, Sakhee. So there's no discussion can be complete without a look at the future, right? So what are the major changes that you foresee that will happen within the digital marketing arena that you can impart maybe some insights to us?
Right. Yeah, I mean, lots of things, right? We talked a lot about personalization and AI today, but I think that's definitely something I'm super excited about, right? Personalization is a big one. And the evolution of personalization, what we talked about, the in-house and the external, the third-party data and in-house first-party data, the evolving nature of how you're able to use both of them will define how much and the quality of personalization which can drive. Can continue to drive, right? And it's interesting that the consumers are now used to a certain level of personalization. So how do, in the backdrop of the policies and the evolution, how will organizations continue to deliver on that expectation have developed with that? So that's super exciting. And I think the other one is AI, right? Which is how do you make it more automated to analyze consumer behavior, search patterns, data? How are you able to connect different journey? Like I'm on a laptop right now, then I could be on my iPad, my phone, then I'm on my TV. Every channel is targeting with me with certain content or advertising, right? So how do you connect those dots together, be able to sort of make it more natural interactions? So for example, one of the ideas which had stuck with me was MasterCard had created a Facebook Messenger bot some time back, and they'd use like natural language processing to just be able for people to assess their own expenditures. That you could like interact with the chatbot to say, hi, how much did I spend in the month of May? And then the chatbot would give you an assessment of, oh, you spent $100 And then you could say, did I spend it on yes, you spent on restaurants. This is where you ate. So things like that, more probably going more towards like personal assistance. So that's interesting. And it's a combination of, I think, personalization and how AI and machine learning will continue to be used. And maybe one, which is probably more general, right? I'm super excited by the whole social commerce, which is all of the commerce websites are having these live sessions, which are people are selling stuff, they're recording themselves and streaming how they're even selling the smallest of things, which is maybe a cream or a pen. And that's exciting to see how its apps are driving in-app engagement and like they're becoming like super apps, and you can actually have videos, interact with people. More like, I think, I don't know if you guys remember, there was this tele-shopping which used to come on TV, and you could actually online, they would give a phone, they would demo a product and there was a phone call which you could do. So I think it's a format of that which has come to the social apps. So that's very exciting, something very new, and I'm intrigued by how that trend has blown out of proportion.
The example of the MasterCard reminded me the interview that I have got with Michael Steinman from Nuance Communication. So basically, they build and integrate that with Facebook for insurance company within Australia. So what I'm curious, and I want to dwell a little bit, and equally, I personally think that one of the most Facebook or a platform like Facebook has brought and often are winning in the industry is that the ability to integrate with third party, the ability to allowing integration to be able to create something that is not quite possible. So my question for you then is, for any organization, even though if they are not necessarily advertising or marketing company, how feasible should they investigate and look into this area to build a certain integration and take advantage of the Facebook as a platform to market their product?
Yeah, and I think it boils down to the fundamentals, right? Which is, again, what's your business need? What's your business goal? And whether you can strike certain such partnerships to, it's 1 + 1 greater than having a particular synergistic relationship to be able to leverage the third-party data from a partner and enrich your own experience to people, right? And I think in this condition, it's in these kind of things, it's more a particular organization's presence on another platform, right? Like a Facebook, the example you gave. And you're interacting within Facebook, but for your brand. In most such cases, and again, you get into contractual agreement, and all of those things get taken care of where you're in a contractual agreement to leverage the power of both the platforms together and be able to give your consumers a better experience and a more solution to their problems, right? So I think it boils down to that. And that's how I look at it, right? Like any such partnership should be able to drive that additional value. And I think what we're getting into, what I see and I really appreciate, is transparency around, even on the Facebook platform, if you're doing any partnership or influencer marketing, there's always a reference back to your partnership, right? That co-partnership with, sponsored by, or in partnership with X brand, particular X brand partnering with Y brand, the X brand on their ads will always say in partnership with Y. So it's also become like your audiences become a little more aware of the partnership and how their data is handled and connected together. And it makes great sense if you're able to drive that synergy. And that's how partnerships should be driven, and it should make sense for both sides. It should ultimately, I think it's a successful partnership only, I think, if it makes sense for your consumers, it value out of the whole deal. Yeah.
No, that's good. I love that. I was just trying to arrange between Sue and I. To ask the next question, or are you happy for me to ask?
Yeah, I'm happy to take the next one. So I'm just really curious, like we spoke about how digital marketing is always evolving, is always changing. And we think we've got it, and something else will come and disrupt everything that we know. So how do you, what kind of advice would you give to new sort of data-driven digital marketing entering the workforce? How do you think they should prepare themselves to future jobs, basically?
Yeah, I know, great question. And a lot of people reach out to me, digital marketing. These are the skills which are extremely important right now, whether you're in a large organization or smaller startups or even starting your own. I think if you have this particular skill set, you can do you from of course you need skill sets around building products and stuff, but the reach, the marketing, the measurement, all sort of gets taken care of. So definitely very important question. My advice would be to every person wanting to get into digital marketing is don't be shy, get your hands dirty and just learn, be curious and just be on that journey. Don't pick up a specialization too soon as well. Even within digital marketing, there's so much, right? You can go from into just audiences and the strategy, the marketing strategy bit. You could be an expert media planner. You could be an expert data analytics person. Or for the particular channels and capabilities within digital, you could be an email person, a social person, SEO. You could be looking at just search in general, search SEO, SEM, just so many things, right? And I sometimes feel that the new individuals want to pick up this specialization too soon. So my recommendation is have an open mind. Digital marketing is usually sort of a combination of multiple skill sets along with functional and data skills. So you could have your own area of specialization, but come in with what excites you, learn the end-to-end. At the same time, keep going deeper, but don't just get into web too early. Understand the whole ecosystem and then slowly, I think, get into your expertise, because that has really helped me as well. From a much wider background, a technical skill set, then having done slightly more broader marketing roles, it gives me, I feel that's a great advantage because I can then go deeper into whichever function I want to.
I so agree about what you said in the earlier part. The marketing is going to allow them to go places. And the key reason why I was saying that is because compared to 20 years ago, building a technology product, it's just so much easier. You just have to put them together. But at the same time, the market just so many products. So because of that, getting the words out and getting people to know about the product and the brand and the company, it's becoming so much on that. Now, this almost coming to the end of the interview, and I'm going to ask my usual to go to question. So the first one, I'll ask the first one, and I'll let Sue take the second one. The first one I have got for you is important first principle.
So yeah, I think my most important first principle is always assume positive intent, because I think people are usually reasons, it may be the right reasons according to them. but yeah, I think always assume positive intent of people in all aspects of your life. And when you're in doubt, when you feel that, oh, the other person doesn't have a positive intention, always put yourself in there. So it brings a lot of perspective as to why they're talking like this, or why they're asking for a certain things, why they're pushing back, why they're just being plain mean. So yeah, those I think sometimes just help me rationalize some of the just behavior around me.
Cool. So I will end with the last question. What is that one book that you have read and better for your younger self to have? If so, why?
Yeah. So I recently read, I wouldn't say I completed it, but which is Principles by Ray Dalio.
I know that one.
And yeah, it's an incredible book. It's just that it's so thick. It's so thick. And with kids and work, it's very hard to go into just finish what possibly. But it's a great book. And the best thing about the book is it has a summary page at the end of every chapter. And at least I've read all of those. But it's an incredible book, right? Because it tells you highlight one particular thing right from that. It tells you to be aware of your blind spots and ego barriers. So those are the two biggest takeaways for me, which is you don't know everything. So, and it's okay to ask. It's okay to ask people and be independent and neutral about it, right? If somebody has a negative opinion or a constructive feedback, just take it with a grain of salt. So also learn about your ego barriers, that what makes you take or what makes you not take a particular feedback in a certain, and be radically open-minded to hear other person's perspective to make your decisions better, to make your outcome better. So yeah, that was eye-opening for me, that know your blind spots and know your ego barrier. And I think that's a learning. I agree, but as you keep growing older, you keep getting more humbler about things. That, oh, I don't know this. I think in our 20s, we're usually like, oh my God, I just know everything. I'm there to conquer the world.
The world.
So, and I think we should all have that somewhere still, but just be, I think, full of empathy and just understand what you don't know, right? So that's an incredible book. It's very, very thick. I do hope to go back to it at some point again.
He actually released a mobile app as well in the same context of principle. It basically helps you principle as well. Try it out.
Yes. And he writes a lot on LinkedIn. So I've started following him. So he shares CRISPR stuff. So very insightful. So yeah, if I recommend to follow him. Lots of learnings from life, work, self-learning. So very interesting material.
It's quite a legend. Now, this is the conclusion. And again, thank you so much, Sakhee, for sharing a lot of those digital marketing and advertising of the world and how analytics is applied. Equally, I can't help but thank so much Suen coming into the picture to help me interview. Thank you so much for the both of you.
Yeah, and thank you to both of you as well. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, me too. It's been fun.